Hello, and welcome to the U Factor. We're dedicating this bi-weekly series to taking the guesswork out of recruitment, career development, and mentorship. I'm your host, Zainab Zaidi, and I can't wait to kick off the series. Join me bi-weekly as I speak with both leaders and upcomers alike on their journeys in the cybersecurity space. I'd like to start off by recognizing that we're on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas and the territory that is covered by the Williams Treaties. We are thankful for the opportunity to learn and grow on the islands of peoples of Mississauga of Scugog Island First Nation. I am so excited to introduce you to my first guest. He might be the CIO of the region of Durham, but if you've ever had the opportunity to speak with him, you'll know he is super approachable, the life of the party, so to speak, and always a great sounding board. I'm talking about none other than Kalyan Chakravarthy, or more well known as Casey. Casey, thank you so much for joining me today. And to kick us off, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Zainab, for a wonderful introduction. I don't know if we can top that off. So I'll just say my name is Kalyan Chakravarthy, but I go by KC, like the KC and the Sunshine Band. And like I made this joke with my college students and they didn't get it. Then like I realized saying that like there is a generation gap that's happening. It's very sad, but like anyway, coming back to it, like I'm the CIO for the region of Durham, as well as like I teach at Durham College. And more than all these things, like a tech enthusiast, like, and I'm an entrepreneur by myself, like, and I want to support most of the entrepreneurs that are coming from Durham or like any in the Canadian area. So those are my interests to give you a brief overview of myself.
Fantastic. And as we can see, a key, I think what you've done is to be continuously learning. So I know you hold an MBA, you teach, you give lectures, you speak at conferences. Obviously, you have a position with the region of Durham. How do you prioritize your options and how do you prioritize your career?
I think we can't prioritize our career. Like it is about like what you're doing is like you're always working and you're always learning, because we are in a technical field like which is ever changing. What is there today is not there tomorrow. So you need to be active in the forums as well as like in the areas where people are talking about. And like for that, the best way is to network, to talk to people, and like they would provide you with that information. And like all this, I feel as a part of my job, because like whatever the decisions that we are making, like if I'm thinking about introducing something at the region, we know because like I might have learned about it either by talking to somebody or in a conference or heard from somebody that like this is going to be the next big thing. So I feel that like this is all part and parcel of the job. So there is the prioritization is about, yeah, there are some dedicated desk work that like you have to do from time to time, but like it's very important to talk to people and learn from them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another remarkable aspect of your career has been your agility. So once upon a time, IT was all about code, hardware, and software, and today it touches all processes. So how have you kept up with all of the shifting IT applications in your field?
I think the two words that I use is adaption and adoption. And because like all in the journey, my role, although I'm in IT, my role has changed. So the lens with which I look at the technology and understand it and implement it has changed. So like I need to adapt to the role that I'm working in, like so continuously, as well as the technology has been changing, as like we talked about, like it's an ever-changing field. So we need to adapt to the new technology and not to be stuck at one place and say, this is what I know, so this is what I'm comfortable with. So going into and going that working into the areas where you're not comfortable with, that is the best way to understand new things. So that's why I say more than agility, I would really bring in the adoption and the adaption of the things.
I love that. So you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So do you have any advice for those who are having a hard time balancing those two?
I wouldn't say advice, like it is like all I would say that like what I do, and like maybe they would like to emulate it in their own way, because for everybody it's different, right? Like you have to take something and you have to personalize it. I think one thing that like you always want to do is think about what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and like how is technology helping it. And like when you're talk, like listen to the story and tell the story. It's very important. Like the simplistic things, I think we always talk about, we try to complicate our answers, we try to complicate our life by adding more things into it. Like they were like, when I hear the word digital transformation, all these things, I get stressed out to say like, okay, let's talk in simple language.
Yeah.
And like, let's talk in stories, because that's where we connect with each other. That is how the knowledge has been passed from ages. Like when you look at the ancient books, the ancient culture, it's been passed through stories. So talk in stories and listen in stories, like, and that will tell you what needs to be done. And like, even from a technology, whether it's a tool, right? Like it's just the tool. So you instantly can identify what is the problem that you're solving, and like, what is the tool that you want to use. So if you simplify it, like, and understand it, like, I think life is much simpler, in my opinion.
I love that you're talking about simplifying complicated concepts, because at the end of the day, we are there's an end user, right? There's someone at the other end of this product or solution that we're creating. And sometimes we get so caught up in the inner workings of it, that the end user is a little bit baffled when you present them a product, and there's a little bit of a mismatch there. So when you're talking about, asking them or talking in stories, something that has, like you said, been passed down from generation to generation, it's something everyone relates to, is simplifying that. And a huge aspect of that comes down to communication. So communication is something, it's something that's an integral part of every process, but often something that gets deprioritized in certain instances, or sometimes people are just not comfortable communicating, right? They'll have, either it's a communication barrier, or they're just not comfortable in a situation. So I'm talking about, Daniel Pinsky and I had a session on this, and he was talking about introverts, right? And a lot of the personalities on the tech side have an introverted aspect to them. So going outside of it's really going outside of their comfort zone. So talk to me a little bit about that, or how do you combat that, or the I guess the confusion, or the uncomfortability with communication?
I think it's multifaceted, in my opinion. Like, first thing, as I said, right, like, it is about simplifying the message that you want to talk. Like if you are talking to it, I always look at it where any complex thing that like I want to talk, like how would I explain it to my daughter? And that is where like where we have a lot of fights on, like where she said like, okay, explain me about NFT in 3 minutes, and where like and like so that's where like that simplicity of messaging is really helpful. That's the first. The second is like, when we talk about introverts, it is about like, we have to push our boundary. And like, we are not talking about like you're explaining about yourself, you're talking about a belief, you're talking about something that you know, which you are sharing it to other people. That's the second. And the third part, like, which I personally experience a lot, is about language barrier. That like, where the moment like where we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a lot of people who are coming in from various backgrounds, and language becomes a big barrier. And like, which has a mean for me as well, where when I'm talking, like almost like I'm thinking in my mother tongue, and I'm translating it, and then I'm speaking. So there is an additional step that is there. And sometimes when I'm doing these interviews like this, or like any other place, I struggle to find the right word. And like, it frustrates me. But like, the way to overcome it is to do it more. The more you talk about it, the more comfortable we become. And once you're comfortable, things starts flowing. And it's about that confidence, right? Like sometimes once you get that confidence, you can talk about it. So I believe like, big thing is about keep it simple, push that boundary, and explain it in stories.
I love the fact that you're being vulnerable with us and talking to us about the battles that you face on a daily basis. This is something that's commendable, and I don't think a lot of people or native English speakers recognize this. That is the translation that happens in the mind. For someone who has a mother tongue that is, that's a different language other than English, English is the world's, widely recognized language, but when you're communicating, it's that translation of your initial thought process into English. So sometimes I've seen impatience when someone is trying to come out an idea, or you'll see the ums and the uhs where the conversation is getting stuck. And that's literally, the mind is just buffering, right? It's like, I wish I just said buffering, translation happening right now. And then, it's coming out. So, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's something that, I wish more people understood, that when there is a language barrier, that it's more involved than just saying there's a language barrier. There's a lot of things that person has to overcome. So when they are taking the opportunity to speak or to communicate, patience is key, and promotion, right, is in making sure that, for example, if the idea didn't get translated well or didn't come off well, for someone to step in and say, you know what, let me help you with that thought process, right? Let me see how I can, help. It's all about, really, I would say, even within work, building a community, right? A lot of workplaces say we're family, but I really believe it should be we're community, because where everything is recognized and everything, you come together and you celebrate what's different and what's unique. At the same time, you are sharing your resources. So Casey, talk to me about your team. For example, if you noticed a communication barrier on your team, or you noticed someone was, a little bit shy, for example, and I'll use myself as an example. You'd have a hard time shutting me up now. But back in the day, I used to, I had a lot of imposter syndrome where I didn't want to bring my ideas to the table. And this is early in my career. And I had a manager pull me aside and say, listen, you've got fantastic ideas that you deliver after the meeting, but we need you to talk about them during the meeting. So that for me is just, it took a while. And now, I feel a lot more comfortable talking, doing presentations. I mean, it definitely helps when you're on Zoom, because, worst comes to worst, you just hit the mute button and say, oops. But, when you face something like that, Casey, on your team or, around you, how do you interact, and how do you deal with those situations?
First of all, thank you that you didn't say that you are shy now. I was about to
Yeah.
and so. But coming back to what do we do? It's about that nudge. It's about that nudge. And start small. Once again, it's about where there are a lot of people and in IT. I could see in my team, I can count it's 90% of the people have that kind of a personality where they have a lot to say, but they keep it themselves, and then they feel that okay, somebody will say on behalf of them. So opening up the channels. There are different channels. Speaking up doesn't have to be in a meeting. It doesn't have to be done in there, because there are a lot of people who process things in a different way. So it is about keeping that multiple channels open to say, even after the conversation, you have a chance. There is until and unless there are some meetings where you have to make the decision. That's true, but giving that chance. The second is having that nudge, maybe pointing it out and saying that hey, what are your thoughts? Asking that question. Then having some of the things where in my town halls, we ask completely different people to have a presentation for 5 minutes. And I tell them saying that okay, you need to understand that in my first five meetings, or the first five public talk where I bombed miserably. I could not speak when, and this was pre-COVID, right? Where people used to meet they personally,
In
not on
person, yeah. Where
personally,
it's so much
not on
scarier
their
because
phones.
everyone's there
Yeah,
looking at you.
yeah. And where I used to go up on the stage, and I used to freeze, and I don't know what it is. I used to turn red, I used to sweat, all these kind, and still that happens.
Yeah.
But having that first time, telling that all the people, majority of the public speakers, if you ask them, they say the same thing. They still have butterflies even to this day. So you're not different than them. So take the chance. The worst that can happen is you won't be able to speak much. That is not going to change much in life. That is not going to take away your job. That is not going to take away anything. Okay, we'll say, oh, it didn't happen. That's fine. Let's go. It's where we are the people from IT technology, first time when you work it together, it doesn't work. So that's not a problem. But you try it and you make it work. That's how this whole thing comes down to. So having that nudge to those people and having multiple channels so that they can express, because some people are better at writing things, some people are better at speaking, some people have a different way. If you give them the work, they show it, their feedback is in the work, they can change it and give it back to you. So it's about providing those multiple channels and making them feel comfortable, saying there's not much to lose. All you can do is try.
I love that. It's, being in the position of leadership, it's a huge responsibility that falls on your shoulders, which is growing your team. in any way necessary, right? And sometimes and growing the team really is growing the people within it. And their success is your success. At the end of the day, is the organization's success. And, the fact that you're saying creating these multiple channels, because you're absolutely right. Someone might be much more comfortable writing to you in an email, right? The written there's written communication is where they thrive. For some, a private conversation might be it. So I love that concept, and I think that's great advice to any leader looking to really promote communication within their team, is open the channels. So instead of using that one specific channel that you feel like everyone's been using right now, it might not be working for your team. Expand the horizon. It is a little bit more work on the leader, but at the end of the day, the reward is so much greater, right? Because your team has now, it's found another aspect. For example, through the pandemic, one of the things I did was create a virtual hour. So it would be 1 hour, everyone's on Zoom, and we're pretending like we're in the office. So you get to chat, you get to work at the same time. It just made everyone at ease with each other, and it kind of took that away. So did you notice yourself as well, Casey, having to pivot during the pandemic with a lot of these things?
Oh, absolutely, right? Like I think during the pandemic, communication became even more important because there is no body language. There is no that like water cooler chat that is happening. There is no like where even we were in office, like I used to go when I'm walking and like I could just say hi to people, get that like to say we are there. So this became even more important. And like what became important also is like the moment they provide any feedback and like they provide any information, they need to know that like there is an action that is being taken. So that is the feedback loop. More than people think about communication as a one-way street. It is about, okay, I will let all the people give feedback. That's great. But it is your responsibility to go back to people and say, hey, from the feedback that I've received, this is the action that I'm taking. So that kind of communication, making it two-way street where I am responsible for making sure that like I've heard, because earlier, like at least you can see my body language to say, yes, this person is paying attention. I'm not on phone. I'm not doing anything else. But like now it became even more important where like you need to pivot. And like the only way you can get that trust and get that communication is through actions, like making sure that the feedback is acted upon. And like that does not mean that like you'll make changes on whatever that has been suggested, but at least know that like, okay, acknowledge that like this has been there and this is where it is. That biggest thing is that acknowledgement, and sometimes we miss that piece in communication.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, body language is something that's missing now. And communication between a manager and their team is so integral for just the team dynamic and for team morale. And sometimes an email, because it's devoid of any emotion, unless you're using exclamation marks, and you can't use an exclamation mark after every sentence, it makes it hard. And sometimes an email might seem like it's going with a different tone and it was just written in a rush. So encouraging communication, especially when when you're forced into virtual environments. And I mean, virtual environments are not going anywhere. We're now looking at, in my opinion, at a permanently hybrid workspace going forward. So keeping up communication is absolute key. So pivoting a little bit from communication and coming on to coaching and mentorship. In my opinion, I feel that coaching and mentorship at any level of your career are incredibly important. And I've heard so many people say, Casey's my mentor, or call you a mentor. So does the mentor have a mentor?
Absolutely. There are a lot of people, right? Like there are a lot of people like where personally, like I have a couple of my friends who are my mentors, because like that is where like I can go and like let my steam off to say, this is what is happening. And like they calm me down, because like it's that group part of the things. That's the first part of it. Second, for sure, like my boss whom I work for, like he done amazing mentor where like I can go and tell him that like this is what is happening, and like he will patiently listen, then say okay, and like I find the answer in my questions itself and like say great, good job, and you can go. So that's the kind of things that mentorship, like somebody who can bounce off like at this stage, where what you want is like not about somebody who's giving you that advice, but like it is more about somebody is listening to you and like helping you to find the solution for the problem that you came with. So there are a lot of people who are there, and I'll call out if I put the list of it, like I think it will take an hour or so. But my friends,
Yeah, it's like
everybody,
the Oscar speech where the thank yous keep going.
yeah, and you have to play the music pretty soon.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's amazing to hear. I absolutely agree with you. Especially in cybersecurity, mentorship is so important because the field is growing and expanding so quickly, and more things are we're seeing more attacks, we're seeing different vectors. It's just it's an ever evolving field. So, and I feel in when we're in our positions and in the daily routine, we get a little bit tunnel visioned, right? We're so focused on just doing what we can with what we have, that sometimes just bringing in an outside perspective, whether it's a friend or someone. I mean, Humint provides mentorship and career coaching. So whether it's someone in your circle or you get someone to help you out with this, or you reach out to an organization like Humint, it's so important because they can give you a third party perspective, right? They give you, it's like when you're reading a document. You read the same document 15 times, but when you've presented it, there's one grammatical error. So it's breaking that I guess the monotony, and getting someone else to give you a fresh perspective. So in my opinion, I don't feel I know I've heard from some people where I don't think I need to be coached or mentored because they feel like it's a dig at their career or their work ethic. It's absolutely not. It's meant to be complementary to you and to your career and to your career growth. So Casey, for someone looking for a mentor, what do you like? For example, what do you look for in a mentor, or like any recommendations you can give?
I think it's about like mentor. Like I would like you to choose, like there are a couple of things. What kind of mentorship that you are looking for? What is your style? Because the mentorship should suit your style. Where I would like a person who would listen, who would be somebody who can bounce my ideas. And like at a earlier career, where I would like somebody who can guide me. And like where like at a transition stage where like I would like a mentor who can give me with connections. So identify why are you getting that one in. So that is what like you need to really look inside and say, and like choose that kind of mentor. And the mentors will change as you grow. It is not that like, okay, the mentor that you had first is like they can't add more value onto it, but like the stage that you are in, you need a different kind of mentor. So that's where identifying why are you having that mentor, what is that reason for, and then you can really look at it and say, okay, this is the kind of person. And but like choose somebody whom you are very comfortable discussing your failures with. That's the first thing that you need to have in a mentor is you really need to have somebody whom you can sit down and say that like, okay, I failed in this and still not be judged. That's the biggest factor that you need to have in mentorship.
Absolutely. Being comfortable with your mentor is key. And like you said, if you can't discuss your failures, it'll be hard to move past them. And it'll be hard for someone to help you grow. You need to be comfortable discussing those things where you feel like you didn't do your best. And you know what? You might come out from that situation, with someone telling you, no, you did everything you could. And you did everything you could with what you had, and it's okay. Or they might look at the same situation and tell you how you could have pivoted differently and how you can continue going forward. So absolutely agree with that you need to have someone that you're comfortable with. And again, that you don't need to feel like you're betraying your mentor by having a new mentor as your career progresses, because it's natural. At like you said, you might be in a transition phase where networking is incredibly important, and then you might move into a phase where you just need advice or someone to look over what you're implementing and so forth. So don't be afraid to change mentors as you grow. And that doesn't mean you have to leave your old mentors behind. It's great to grow your networks, and it's great to have multiple people that are kind of, your God person per se, looking over you as you grow. And they will always be proud of you, and they'll always be happy for you. So having that backbone or that network cheering you on, it's one of the best things that you can ask for. So on that note, I'm going to ask you, Casey, as a person of color, you've also empowered your teams in many ways. So how do you blend in diversity?
I think the biggest part of diversity is using the word and. because like it is like there are so many people that are there, like there is so much, like diversity is about like that real diversity, and like you're not focusing on one particular person or like one particular thing, but like it is about like getting that options. And like it all once again boils down to creating those channels for everybody to really put that one in, because people who are immigrants who can't voice their opinion, or like people who are like where we talk about like technology people, like they are a bit more introverts, that is another diverse population as well. Like I know that it is not about ethnicity, it is not about that, but like from collecting that information, providing that channels where people can express their opinion is what like you want to get, like because the biggest success of diversity is when everybody, irrespective of who they are, can voice their opinion, and like their opinion is heard and taken into consideration.
I 100% agree with you. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just limited to race or gender or identity. They're also inclusive of diversity of thought and diversity of skill. And I think that sometimes gets left by the wayside. So, it's very often you hear that just because someone hasn't had similar experiences, that their experiences get discounted. So, creating a safe space is absolutely incredible. Have you ever had any roadblocks, Casey, that you would say, either whether it was someone on your team or yourself, due to being a person of color?
I think it's not about the roadblocks, but like it is about where some of the times where like for example, like I'll start with like Kalyan Chakravarthy to KC. That is a big one to change the name, because like it is my name, most of the people like pronounce it as Kalan.
Yeah.
It's easy to, so we had to adjust, to reverse adjust to really go there. But I didn't take it as like it is a roadblock for me. Okay, I figured out a way what it can do. Would that change much of the things? No. If I had to go back, would I not make it Casey? No. It is a great one liner for me to break the ice, to talk about the sunshine band. So it really didn't matter. But like these are the small things where you have the roadblocks, and then the pace of talk, like how we communicate, so the communication becomes another part of it. So these are all these small roadblocks, but like they are not huge things that we can. But at the same time, when I'm saying that I can overcome this, or I overcame this, that doesn't mean it's easy for others to overcome. So there are a lot of these challenges. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of DEI, like from our thing. I think it is just starting. And like where in the next maybe 10 years, with the work that like a lot of people are doing, where we'll be in a place where every voice is heard. And like there is, it really, we become colorblind in that kind of a thing, or like anything about it, like it doesn't matter. But I think it is a long way to go.
I 100% agree with you there. And like you said, for you, you're okay with shortening your name to KC. And it wasn't something that you took very personally. And it's a decision you took, right? That you're saying, I'm going to change it from, instead of having people fight over the pronunciation of Kalyan Chakravarthy, I'm going to go with KC. And I had similar situations. I mean, my name is not easy to pronounce by any stretch of the imagination. It's Zainab, but I mean, even that I'm pronouncing with an accent, right? If I was to pronounce it the way my mother pronounces it, for example, it'd be very hard to roll off the tongue for a lot of people. For some, this is a battle that they will continue, because I agree with them. Name is your identity. So for some, this is incredibly hard to move past. And this is just to let those people know, or if you're someone who does not want anyone to change or to shorten your name, you are absolutely right in approaching it in that manner, right? So don't feel that just because, for example, I go by Z sometimes, just because I've chosen to shorten my name, or KC has, that we're saying everyone should do this. Absolutely not. If you feel like this is something that you would like to continue to push, absolutely, and we should push, right? We should. So for example, one of the things I do, especially when I'm meeting new people or have new people on my team, is I ask for the phonetic spelling of their name. It's something short. It takes me 2 minutes of my day to do, but it makes the other person feel recognized, seen, and heard. And that's what I want from my team. I want my team to know that when they come and join me, or they're working for me or with me, that I respect them as a whole. So if that's something, if you're a leader in a position and you have that opportunity, take the time to ask someone how to pronounce their name. You'd be very surprised. I've walked into teams, years later, and there are team members that have been mispronouncing a name, and that person just gave up. They're like, you know what, I don't even want to bother with it anymore. They can just call me whatever they want. But, and when I started pronouncing it correctly, it was oh my God, we're so sorry, we didn't realize. It's sometimes it's not conscious, but I think, like you said, there's going to be a time, and hopefully, I know there's a huge push towards it. Hopefully we're not too far off from it, where everyone will feel comfortable being themselves, be comfortable voicing their opinion and feel like everyone is equally heard. So as a leader of a team, Casey, any tips or advice for leaders that are, especially as we see the move towards diverse teams, any tips that you have for other leaders in the space on how you can ensure that it's not just a diverse team that you're building, that you're altering the culture to ensure that the diverse voices, and actually everyone's voices, meld well. And the only way really to do that is to adjust organizational culture sometimes. So any tips from your side, Casey?
I think it is going back to basics, like saying that like it is open to feedback. I think that's the biggest one, like where, and also accepting the fact that like like somebody else's opinion might be completely different than mine, and that's fine. That's okay. We are all, at the end of the day, we all need to align on our goal, not on our opinions. So how we reach it, like we'll get that one. And as long as the goal is the same, just open for whatever the opinion that is there. Like, and then like it can be completely where we used to call this one, like in the 2000s, where out of box thinking. Actually, that comes from diversity. The out of box thinking comes from diversity. That really gets to it. So just be open to the things and then say that like, okay, we need to align on the goals, not on our opinions.
And I feel we should also be open to constructive feedback. So as a leader, especially to your teams, if you feel, especially if you're trying to do a culture shift or you're trying to, create a more inclusive work environment, be open to constructive, and again, constructive feedback. There is a big difference between, just I write out their criticism and constructive feedback. So I think that's another thing we need to ensure, is that people are talking about this constructively. Otherwise, it just creates another barrier, right? When you can't talk about it. But as a leader, taking that constructive feedback and then implementing it how best you can. It might be something that you can implement right away. Something as small as, let's have a meeting. Let's everyone, talk about the spellings and pronunciations of our names and what do our names mean? Because all names have meaning, right? So something as small as that too, if it's something that's going to take a longer shift, talk to your staff. And like you said, Casey, acknowledgement. Just because it's something that you cannot implement right now, or something that you see as a long-term play, acknowledge that person, let them know that you've heard and you've seen their concern or their feedback, and these are your plans, or this is how you plan on actioning their request. I think that's absolutely important. Okay, so we are just about out of time, so I won't be able to take any questions and answers. I'm sorry, folks. I promise next time I'll leave some more time for you to chat with my guest. Please feel free to chat with Casey on LinkedIn, or to drop questions below, and we'll ensure that we get them over to him. Just on a final note, Casey, I am going to ask this of all of our guests joining the U Factor, and that is, we have this space, and I want to ensure that we're using it correctly, and we're using it to amplify diverse voices. So, Casey, I'm going to turn it over to you to give you an opportunity to amplify a diverse voice, someone that may have made an impact on your life, or so over to you, Casey.
I think there are a lot of voices that had an impact, but like I would pick who is near and dear to me. Deborah Christmas, works for Gartner, who has been my executive coach and the co-author for the book Please Stay, and an amazing book for all the women in IT, because like she, as a Black woman in IT in the 90s, what she has gone through and like what are the changes that she's seeing in that. It's beautifully written one, and like I love her, the way that she expresses herself. And like you talked about mentors, and like she's one of the mentors where like people that I go to if I have to really bounce off the ideas. So I think that's the person that and she's very, very open if you connect with her on LinkedIn, or if you connect however way it is there, she's open to providing that feedback. And like she's looking at that in diversity. There are like that whole layer, right? Like where it's a woman of color, it's women, and then women of color in IT, because that's a very, very small percentage. And like she's catering to that. So I'd really like to amplify her, and a person you need to connect with and like need to read about. And that she has great things to say. So really like that.
Absolutely. So today we're amplifying the voice of Deborah Christmas. We're going to ensure that we share her information down below, as well as on our post session LinkedIn posts. We'll ensure that we tag her in the post. Thank you so much, Casey. That was phenomenal. I really enjoyed having you on. Any closing thoughts from your side?
First closing thought is like I'm for all the meeting, I was worried those pool balls will fall down sometime, but they didn't happen. So that's good. The second is like basically I just want to wrap the things around like what I believe in is about keep it simple. Whatever the things, the complex problems can be simplified if you think simple enough. Second, when you're expressing yourself, like even the technology ones, tell a story. People are really interested if you tell a story and like personalize it, like and like it really talks to the people. The third, where I think this is for all the people like who are going for a job or any other thing, anticipate the question, like tell me about yourself. Those, that question is going to come in. Be prepared. I think if you are not prepared for those simplistic things, like you will not be prepared for the most complicated stuff. And last but not the least, it's be open to feedback and like provide that, like, and where like be respectful of each other, because providing a feedback, that doesn't mean that like you're criticizing, you're just showing them that like this is what has happened. So be respectful of each other, but at the same time be open to feedback.
I love it. Casey, you've been an excellent guest, and don't worry, those pool balls are anchored into the wall. They'll be going nowhere. Thank you so much. And like we mentioned, if you want to connect with Casey, please connect with him on LinkedIn. And like I mentioned, time and time again, he's always approachable. He's someone you should never be nervous of talking to. He's always got great ideas, always willing to listen. So definitely connect with Casey, connect with Deborah. And of course, signing off on the U Factor. We'll see you again in another 2 weeks, where I'll be chatting with more cybersecurity leaders and upcomers on everything related to cybersecurity recruitment. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.